Hi, and welcome back to the channel. Today I'm excited to show you how to scan negatives and digitize negatives using your DSLR. I'll walk through the equipment that you need and the software that you need to capture those images and digitize them. I'll also include at the end how to build your own copy stand for a fraction of the price of buying one. And I'll be using Negative Lab Pro within Lightroom, which creates fantastic results and is super efficient. It's a fantastic tool that really brings life into those negatives. Whether you be scanning these as a keepsake to digitize them, whether you want to do more post-processing and editing on them going forwards, absolutely super efficient tool to bring those in and digitize them. Okay, so without further ado, let's take a first look at the equipment and then we'll get on to the software and the actual scanning process itself. The first piece of equipment we'll be needing is our DSLR body. I'll be using my Canon 90D. You'll need a quality macro lens, in my case the Sigma 105mm with the lens hood to prevent stray light from entering the lens. And you'll need a copy stand. You could use a tripod, but a copy stand is a much better solution for consistency. Remember to stay tuned for how I built this copy stand to save yourself considerable amounts of money. You'll need a quality light source to backlight the negative or the slide. I recommend at least 95 DIN and one that can also double as a light box. You'll also need a negative holder and a slide mount holder, and you'll also need a de-duster. Now that we've got all our gear established, let's set up our camera on the copy stand. Ensure it's level with the negative using the inbuilt spirit levels. This is the advantage of a copy stand over a tripod. Once in place, you may never need to change it. And then finally, we'll attach the lens hood to make sure that we cut out any stray light. With everything set up, let's now tether the camera to the computer and we'll move on to the software that I use to do the digitization and scanning process. The software I use and find essential for negative digitization is Negative Lab Pro. It's a fantastic tool for converting your negatives into beautiful digital images. It's super simple to install and I'll go through that very quickly and then we'll move on to how I use this within Lightroom. Here we have the home page where you can download the free trial, or if you have a license already, you can just go straight ahead and install with the license. And once you've downloaded the file, you'll notice that you've got two documents. The what's new in the latest release, this is version 2.4. The product is continually developed, absolutely awesome. And you get a quick start guide and you also get the installation file itself. So double clicking on the quick start guide gives us all of the information you could possibly want, how to install the software, how to use it within Lightroom Classic, a superb resource for everything you want to use with this product. So let's go ahead, double click our install file and it will run that straight from the folder. Now I'm installing it on Windows, so you may need to just make sure that this can actually run on your Windows to make sure that the virus protection and the system protection within Windows doesn't prevent you from running the install. So let's go ahead, we'll agree to that. We want to install the full plugin for Lightroom Classic, the raw profiles and the shortcuts. So let's go. Okay, that was really quick. We'll enable the hotkey and we'll open the guide, which we saw briefly earlier as well. And that's Negative Lab Pro now installed. And now I've launched Lightroom, we just need to activate the key that I have for Negative Lab Pro. So if I click on here, I've got a license key and I'm not going to show you this. So I will now activate this. I'd simply cut and paste it into this space and activate it. Now that our camera and software are ready, let's start scanning. Take the selected negative and place it into our negative holder like such. Put the frame onto this to hold it securely in place and close the mount to hold the negative flat. Align your DSLR directly above the negative, ensuring it's parallel to the film plane. With your camera connected to the PC or Mac, start Lightroom and then activate and start tethered capture. Assign any fields you require, such as the session name, the template that you may be using for the file name, the file location, and whether you actually want it to add it to a collection. So I'm going to add it to my Mexico collection, as you can see here. And also metadata, which is absolutely critical. So I have got some presets here for gold 100, gold 400, gold, etc. So let's click the gold 100 because that's the film that I'm going to be looking at. I'll show you quickly what I have set up. If I go into edit presets very quickly and select my Kodak Gold 100, what I have down here, there's a set of Negative Lab Pro ones, and I've set the camera, so it was a Canon EOS 5 that I was using, the film type, the format, and the ISO for this particular one. And this is important because it means that for locating your negatives, it'll be a whole lot easier. So with our camera and our lightbox connected and switched on, let's click on OK to detect the camera. You can see that I've activated my Canon 90D for tethering. Let me activate the live view mode. I will move this to the top of the screen so I have got the maximum amount possible for the actual screen itself. You can see it's slightly out of position, so now let's move our light box very slightly. Let's just move our negatives very slightly. And once we've got it in position, I'll rotate it now so that it's the correct way up to visualize it. I've actually got this on autofocus, which on the 90D is really excellent. In terms of setup, I set my camera to aperture priority or AV mode and adjust the aperture, as you can see here, to f10. This is in the sweet spot for this particular lens, the Sigma 105. I use an ISO of 100. The best thing there is to use the lowest ISO you can for your available DSLR. And on my 90D, I use autofocus, as we can see here, because it's extremely accurate. You can switch this to manual focus and then control the focus if your lens allows, or you can switch your lens to manual focus and then just adjust it manually yourself. I also turn image stabilization off, which I see as just something that is unnecessary for this kind of capture. And at this point, turn off any room lights to minimize reflections from the film. If you're doing it during the day, try to cover this to eliminate any ambient light within the room as well. That'll ensure you capture a well-exposed image of the negative. If you're not tethering with Lightroom but capturing directly to the camera, ensure to set the exposure accurately. I would recommend using the histogram and exposing to the right. Notice also that in my final position and focus, I actually have a black border around the edge. I'd prefer to keep the border so that I can capture the full frame. In post-processing within Lightroom, I can actually then crop this image, knowing that I've captured the full image from the original 35mm film. When you're happy with the focus and the position, we can capture the image. So with the image captured, let's close the tethering. And now let's take a look at our image within Negative Lab Pro. So for now, let's just rotate. We can see that it's come in. We need to rotate this one clockwise so that it's the correct way up. And that's one of the things of having your camera vertical. It can get confused on the orientation sometimes with the internal geometry. So now what I'm going to do is create a virtual copy of this against which I'm going to process. With our virtual copy selected, let's now launch Negative Lab Pro. We've got our plugin extras here and we go to Negative Lab Pro. So for our options when actually doing the conversion, you've got the source. Mine was a digital camera. You can see the other options there. The color model, you can select none, but I actually prefer the basic one because that allows me to use LUTs and lookup tables in the actual post-processing. And I use the pre-saturation, I just let that default to 3. The thing that I do set is the border buffer to 0. This allows me to do any subsequent cropping within Lightroom itself. So let's now convert this negative. You can see that it's actually rendering this, and you can see now that it's done a pretty good job of our initial positive. So you can see here that there are a number of options, and I recommend that you do as much editing at this stage within Negative Lab Pro as possible. I use the Lab Standard option for the actual tones themselves. I will use the Sharpen Lab option as well. You can actually switch Sharpen off, and you can see because of the technology with DSLRs now, it doesn't make a massive difference, but I do like that. You can actually use a lookup table as well and change these to different lookup tables, but I'm going to set this to none for this particular image. One thing to do as well is the default is auto neutral. That actually creates quite a cool color. I prefer the Kodak white balance at this point in time. And now you can actually start to think about what you may want to do with this actual process. I want to increase the contrast on this image a little bit. I may just want to increase the brightness a little bit. But drop the exposure just to create a little bit more depth in the actual image. The saturation I always leave at the default 5. I don't want it to be oversaturated, and I wouldn't recommend. And you can actually do significant amounts of processing with this. And you can save these as presets for this roll of film or this type of film. And you can also compare it with the before and after. So that's quite a subtle difference, but it really enriches the color of the actual El Castillo temple at Chichen Itza in Mexico here. And then what we can do is we can also look at the advanced tab. This is something that I would recommend having a quick look at and then saving the options. The file format that I wanted to save in is TIFF. I don't want it to save as JPEG. I save it as 16-bit. And I also have 0 compression on my final image. And my color space that I use is sRGB, mainly because that one is the most common out there. And then I want it to stack in terms of the actual image as well. And that's it applied. And that's our Negative Lab Pro processed image. And now I'll go on to how I process this in Lightroom as well. So let's zoom in on our image. And there's every chance that we may want to do a little bit of post-processing here. You can see the film grain. It's actually focused enough to get some film grain out of this. We've done a little bit of sharpening. We can unsharpen that a little bit. That's my default sharpening for films at this point. I want to do a little bit of noise reduction just to reduce it a little bit. You can see it's really bringing the image out now, but I want to make sure that we do keep some texture because we want to keep that negative film effect. So let's zoom out again to our image. You can notice that we do have some little bits of dust. I'm not perfect at getting dust off, but this is where Lightroom comes into its own. We'll just do some dust removal on that image, and that's all that we need to do. Oh, there's a nice bit down there. Okay, so that's all we need to do in terms of getting rid of the bits of dust that are retained on the image. And the only real editing I want to do to this one is actually to the sky. I just want to enhance the sky a little bit just to show you that you can now adjust these. So it's selecting and edited the sky for me. And I just want to bring the exposure of that down just a little. Now, one thing you'll notice is because Lightroom is non-destructive and works on the underlying negative, some of the sliders like exposure where it's impacting light actually work in reverse. So you just need to be a little bit conscious of that. So I'm just dropping, although it's a positive number, it's dropping the exposure. And I'm moving it to the yellow side of the temperature, the warmer side, rather than the colder side, just to create that blue effect. So where it comes to color, you'll notice that it is reversed. And that's all I wanted to do to the sky to bring that out. And then finally, what I want to do, I just want to finalize my image and give it a little bit of a crop just to bring it into the actual space that we've got available for us. Make sure that we're cutting out the border now. And we can do that. We've just straightened the image just a little bit, maybe just a little bit more. And now we've done our crop as well. And that's our final image. And I really hope that you agree that this, using Negative Lab Pro, has done a fantastic job of capturing this negative and this scene. Minimal editing within Lightroom itself, as you saw. And now within Negative Lab Pro, what I can actually do is save each of these as presets for either this roll of film or this type of film, which is so powerful. And that makes my ongoing process going forward to digitize my negatives superbly efficient. What about slide scanning, I hear you ask? Well, this is much easier than negatives, and there's so little advanced processing, but the equipment required is exactly the same. So we'll mount our slide in the same way as our negatives, using the slide mount. And what we'll do, we'll connect our equipment, our copy stand, camera, and tether the camera to Lightroom and your computer in exactly the same way as we did for negative scanning. Launch the tether, we set up the parameters exactly as we did for the negatives. The one difference here that I have set up a metadata for Fuji Velvia 50, which is the slide that I'll be scanning on this occasion. Click OK, and this launches our tethering, and we can activate the live view. We can see that it's brought it in sideways. It's important to align the frame with the alignment of your sensor in your camera as well. What we can do, we can rotate this to actually, it will actually make it the correct way up for us to view. However, you'll notice it crops the top and the bottom. Another thing that's really critical to note, you have developed settings up here. I, by default, set this to none. There are some further down, one of which is color presets, and it is direct positive. I actually don't find that that is particularly useful, but it may be worth taking a look at for your slide films. So let's now focus. So we will focus, the camera is now focusing. I do find that I do need to make minor adjustments using the actual manual adjustment just here. It's probably not coming through on YouTube, I suspect. However, within my actual image on the screen, it's really clearly noticeable that it is focusing it more accurately. Okay, so let's re-rotate that so we capture the whole frame, and then we can simply capture it. And as you can see, that is significantly easier to do. We brought it in upside down, so let's just rotate that to the correct way up. We'll enter the develop module. I actually do very minimal editing to these. This makes the process so efficient. You can see here that we've got a little bit of noise. It's actually brought in the grain of the film, which is amazing. So I just do a little bit of sharpening on this. I just bring that up just a little bit, somewhere around there, and just bring the radius up just a little bit so it processes it in a little bit more detail. And then just do a bit of noise reduction on the luminance just to take out the worst of the grain. And you can see the impact that's having on the image. The only other thing that I change is I change the profile to Adobe Landscape. And then just for my own benefit, to make sure I take out the frame, I just do the crop. And there's our final image, voila. And it's as simple as that to scan slides. And that's covered the equipment that you need and the software that you need to make the process really efficient to digitize all of your negatives. Please remember to like and subscribe. Your support for the channel is massive, and I hope that you've found this particularly useful. I'm now going to move on to how to build your own copy stand. So without further ado, let's have a look at how I built mine and saved so much money. It is the fraction of the price of one that you will buy in the shops and makes your process so much greater at digitization. The first thing you'll need is a solid base. I have used MDF. You need something that will not warp. That's the most important thing for your base. So get a piece of wood that you guaranteed will not warp. Second and optional, get a wood dye. I used a matte black wood dye. This will cut out any ambient light, and actually it just makes it look a little bit better when it's completed too. And you'll need a post. This is really just from my local DIY centre, the same as the MDF wood. This actually is the leg of a table, just requires 4 screw holes. So with that, you just need 4 screws. I just happen to have these lying around. Didn't need to make any special purchase for these. And then the most expensive, if you like, but in the relative scheme of things, and the most critical, is the small rig clamp. This is absolutely brilliant. This clamps on the post. I'll show you how I construct it in a second. And then this is where you will fit the camera. And last but no means least, if you've got an Arger Swiss connector, get one of these. I'll put the links for some of these in the description below so that you can click on these. I just got this and the small rig clamp from Amazon. Absolutely amazing. This was just a matter of a few pounds. And actually, this is a really, really great Arger clamp for a tripod. So now let me show you how I constructed it. In terms of construction, I dyed the MDF black, made sure it was good. I drilled 4 pilot holes for the screws in the base in the correct position as well, to one edge. I got it cut to size in the DIY store that I got this from, knowing the size that I wanted because their machinery is much better at cutting it than mine. I then screwed the post into the base. I then slide the small rig clamp onto the post into the correct position. I have this marked, but you may need to do some small adjustments when you first put it on to make sure it fits with your camera. I then also attach the Arger tripod mount onto the small rig clamp, ready to mount my camera. And if any of your components have spirit levels in them, just make sure that at this point it's horizontally and vertically aligned. And that's it. That is as simple as it is to construct your own copy stand. It's now just a question of connecting the camera, adjusting the height with your negatives and slides to make sure it's at the right height for your actual digitization process. And that concludes the process of digitization of my negatives and slides. I hope that you found this really useful. I've covered the equipment that you need, the software and the process as I've mentioned. Please feel free to drop any comments that you may have or any questions you may have in the comments below. And please remember to like and subscribe. Your support for the channel is massively appreciated as we move forward and continue to grow the channel. Thank you very much, and I'll see you soon.